Welcome, everyone. This is my webinar on mainly IFS, but I'll share some about TEAM-CBT as well, and how I've used components of TEAM to really enhance the process of IFS. And to share with you a little bit about me, my name is Tyann. I see many familiar faces, but several new ones. And I'm in private practice in Oklahoma. And in the past year, I've really found a passion for trauma work. For about 6 years, I've mainly worked with postpartum women. And in that population, I saw a lot of postpartum OCD and started to specialize in that for about a year. And then in OCD work, I actually found a lot of trauma when we were exploring where did these doubts come from. And I use an approach called ICBT for treating OCD in addition to ERP. And in one of the modules, we explore their obsessional doubts and where the doubts typically come from. And in personal experiences, I've almost always seen like, oh, this and this happened in my childhood or in my teen years. And then it led me to actually doubt myself, not trust myself, wonder if I could also become a bad person or harm somebody. But something led them to not trust who they are and their senses. And then that led me into just really diving into a lot more trauma work. And I also wanted to emphasize that TEAM-CBT is really a beautiful and awesome approach that has worked like wonderfully for many of my trauma patients. And I think sometimes when I'm sharing about other modalities, sometimes our community feels a little bit uh, possibly even a little bit threatened or wondering like, does that mean like TEAM-CBT? I had someone ask like, does that mean TEAM-CBT really isn't the approach for um, everyone, basically? And I just want to emphasize that it is a really beautiful approach. It's a powerful approach that has worked for many people. And I found that maybe in 3 or 4 of the cases that I've been really stuck with throughout my time in private practice since 2017 are probably cases with some components of complex childhood trauma that then I see doesn't do as well or may need a little bit more than just what we currently have. And so for about 90% of people, I find that TEAM-CBT does really well. And especially with single incident or adult trauma, it's done really well. And adding in these components of IFS have, I found, just really helped me to get unstuck from some of my other cases, or just creates a cool different angle for someone who may resonate with this more experiential, mindful approach. So I've had like a client who hated worksheets. So she hated the daily mood log, and then we've tried IFS and it worked really well for her. And I've had a couple of clients who hated IFS. Like, I just want to put that out there. Not every approach is for everyone. And then that allows me to just have some flexibility. She worked much better with the structure of TEAM-CBT and some of ACT. And so I just want to highlight that and emphasize that I'm bringing in what I'm learning from IFS, not because TEAM-CBT isn't an awesome approach that I still really love and use with most people. It's just one additional tool that just gives you another option that can be a really good fit for some of your clients that the current approach isn't working for. Okay. And this is just the site for my private practice for those who want to learn more, especially if you're in Oklahoma. And I am a certified TEAM-CBT trainer. Just really love this work. I think anything that I've learned, components of TEAM-CBT has really helped me to improve the effectiveness of that process. And I currently just really love combining the current approach of TEAM-CBT with some values work and behavioral components of ACT, in addition to IFS for moments when I see they have spaces or parts of them just feeling really stuck at a hard time in their lives. And how we define trauma is really individualized. So through IFS, I've learned that we really don't want to define trauma for the person. So we don't even want to define like a war or events of abuse as trauma because trauma is so individualized. And so trauma for one person may not be, the same event may not be traumatizing for the other person. So trauma is just defined as any hard, overwhelming life experiences that still impact them today, and a part of them still feels stuck in that. Okay. And I am a mom of two girls. So these are my two girls. My oldest just turned 8 in March, and my youngest is turning 4. So it's just really amazing to me how much they're growing and changing as I've been training since the youngest wasn't even born yet. And just feel really grateful to be here on this journey to share about healing tools with you all. It's one of my greatest passions. And I want to share with you a client story first on when I was first learning IFS and what really sold me on adding this as an additional tool to our already awesome TEAM-CBT awesome arsenal of tools is her story. So I had this client who came to treatment. She struggled with anger and specifically road rage. There were moments where she said, it's really feeling like it's getting out of control. And I haven't had someone who just specifically came to work with road rage. So I just went through the TEAM-CBT approach because she's saying, like, I'm getting to a space where I'm honking at people, I'm cussing them out, and I'm afraid like I'm gonna get shot because the road rage is feeling like it's getting out of control. So I just used a lot of TEAM-CBT. We got to a moment in time when she was struggling with the road rage. And so with TEAM-CBT, we do testing. I measure how much anger she experiences through the brief mood survey. I measure our therapeutic connection to make sure she's feeling safe and connected. And through the E, I'm just making spaces for empathy to really hear her story, to hear how it shows up for her, why it bothers her, why she wants to change it. And in the A, the addressing the resistance, we just get really specific. We went through the daily mood log. A moment in time when she experienced road rage was when she was wanting to exit and someone's going really slowly and they're blocking her way, or they're just going slower than she'd like. She just fills up with this rage that she really believed was out of proportion to the situation. And she even had moments where she could say, like, that poor um that poor innocent whatever expletive she would use, that poor innocent a or jerk or whatever, probably was just you know like uh, caught up in their head, or maybe they experience anxiety too. And I even feel bad for them, but I can't control this. I can't contain this road rage. And so we went through the daily mood log, connected with her thoughts, right? Like people should just go at the speed of traffic. People should be more respectful of other people's spaces and let people exit and things like that. So lots of should statements. Underneath that, too, were moments where she felt unsafe and kind of scared. So I was like, okay, so there's anxiety that then leads her to feel unsafe, that then leads to the road rage, which makes sense. And so we just went into positively reframing all of her feelings, the fears, really valuing safety. Her anger, it has just been there to protect herself when she's felt unsafe, right? And that was really helpful for her to do positive reframing of those emotions. I feel like some of that is a lot like IFS as well. We're not villainizing your rage or your anxiety. We're looking at all of the good reasons why it's there. What does it show that you value? So you value safety, you value respect, you value fairness, some sense of order in the world, right? That was some of the things that she had come up with. And so she thought positive reframing was really helpful. It helped in moments to then not like shame herself over the rage that would come up. And then we did things like reattribution. What are some of the reasons why a person may go slower? Um, and that, our hopes is that it can create spaces of understanding and compassion. What are other explanations other than they're just trying to be disrespectful of you, that they're going slower, And we came up with a lot of different things that she thought was helpful. Like maybe they have anxiety about driving. Maybe something was on their mind. Um, maybe they just weren't aware. Maybe they're texting, which then made her upset too. But we did some reattribution and she thought that was helpful. I used the tool called process versus outcome, where instead of trying to change the outcome, of like wanting everyone on the road to be fair and to be orderly, what are the processes that you can control? So she can control for herself, avoiding certain roads during traffic. That shows that she's just wanting to align with her values of getting from point A to point B in a timely and safe manner. Other things that she could do is just find different things to listen to music or different things that she could control that could help her shift this process instead of having her attention and focus on all the people doing wrong. It's focusing on what you can do in these moments. And that tool was helpful, and the semantics was helpful to help change should statements. We did some other tools too, like externalization of voices for like should statements. And while all of this was really helpful for her, she would have moments where she's doing well, and then she would relapse big time. Like she'd do well, she'd use some of the tools, and then there'd be a moment when she's like, all of the tools went out the door and I'm honking again and I'm cussing people out again. And so I felt kind of stuck in this process with her. And this was fortunately around the time I was starting to dive into learning about IFS for trauma, especially for complex trauma and childhood trauma, because I know those were spaces in the few cases that I've been stuck, that it was just a little bit more challenging to help them heal through. And so I just shared with her, I have this new tool. And I didn't even tell her it was IFS. I said, I just have this new tool that could help us possibly connect with this part of you that keeps having road rage and see what's going on with it. And my hope is then it could help you to have more understanding, and possibly we could see if it could help it become less extreme. Would you be open to that? And so she said, sure, I'm open to trying anything. And then as we connected with this part of her that carried so much anger and rage, we realized, and I wouldn't have gotten there or connected it at all, but we realized through the road rage, she said, this is the part of me that's been carrying anger for a long time, because we would connect with that part. We would ask it, what is it trying to do for her? What is this part? Good intentions. What's its job? And how old is it? And it would say, like, I've been around since I've been around protecting, let's call her Mary. I've been around to protect Mary for a long time, since around the time she was about 9 years old. And then we would have her connect with this part and ask it, what is your job? What are you trying to do for her? And it would say the part, again, this is just them connecting with the subconscious part of them in this way that externalizes it a little bit, so they could see it and have a relationship with it. And as she connects with this part, she's saying, this part is saying it's been around since I was about 9 or so, and it's wanting to protect me from feeling like less than, from feeling really disrespected. And while it's there with, when I feel unsafe, like when I'm on the road, when we asked it, what is it afraid of would happen? What is this part of you afraid would happen if it didn't show up in this extreme way? That part then came back with, I'm afraid you'll be in a deep hurt and in a lot of despair. And so some of these questions we explored included, like, what's its fear? And then is there a part that it's protecting? Because in IFS, it believes like all of these protective parts, just like positive reframing, serves a purpose. And it's usually protecting a deeper wound. And then that was when the road rage part just revealed to her, just visually as she's connecting with it, this little girl, her 9-year-old self, that was in a room abandoned by her mom. And I'm just changing some of the details here just so it's not identifiable. So it's still the gist of what's happened, but I'm changing up some of the details to protect identity. And just saw where she's in this room staring at the white walls because mom didn't pick her up again. And mom prefers to go hang out with her boyfriend. And in this world, she saw that she was a burden. And if my mom doesn't even love me, who would love me? And this was the most powerful insight she's ever connected with. She had said that I can't believe this part of me that's angry and showing up as road rage is actually a part that's been trying to protect this wound for so long. So road rage was even almost like an adrenaline, a protector that's been there to help her actually not connect with this deep wound that she's been carrying for a long time. And then we just went through some of the tools to connect. I only just started learning IFS, so it was still very clumsily done. And after she connected with this wounded part and was able to retrieve it and have a relationship with this younger part of herself and let herself know that it's not because you were unlovable. Your mom just wasn't at a space where she could raise a kid. It's not your fault. And it's not about you. You know, it's about her and her readiness. And so those were some of the components during the unburdening process that she was able to connect with and really felt like once she retrieved that little part into a space where she felt safer, she's no longer locked in that little room, in that room, just staring at the walls, being abandoned, waiting for mom. And she was able to retrieve her to a space that she loved, where she could just dance, look at the animals. She loved going to the zoo and connecting with spaces like that. And so once she was able to retrieve that wounded part and connected with it, the following week she came back and she said, whatever that visualization thing you did with me, I don't want to be dramatic, but I can say, I think it changed my life. And here I am, like kind of mind blown. Like we've tried all of these tools and this, my like poorly, clumsily use of IFS could create this life change for her. It really made me interested on like, what if I knew it more fully and really integrated this approach? If it could change her life, what could it do for many of my other clients? So she said that road rage that I've been working with, I'm not saying it's completely gone, but I may like mumble underneath my breath like idiot. And I'm moving on. Like there's no desire to like honk at people, cuss at people, speed up and cut them off. It's just gone. And unexpectedly, she said, and like those moments when my coworkers or friends are saying things that I've taken really personally, and I've gotten upset about that, I'm not taking it personally anymore because I'm not carrying around this burden that I'm unlovable and I have to constantly prove myself. And so working through the road rage then also helped her work through defensiveness, taking a lot of things personally, seeing them as criticisms. And so this is what sold me on IFS. And as I dived into it, I've gone through the official training. I just have one weekend left. I've really learned to love this approach as a really powerful tool that we can add to our already great approach. Many of us are TEAM-CBT therapists here, but even if you're not familiar with TEAM-CBT, this is just a really beautiful, compassionate approach that's very respectful of the client. It's very client-centered, and it gets to spaces of insight that I feel like not many other tools have allowed me to get to. Because I would have never, ever connected road rage with abandonment from a parent figure for her. So that was a really cool experience to really go through that and to see the deeper external shifts that they can get from healing those wounds and understanding where the rage and the anger was coming from. Okay, so through that story, I'm wanting to share with you a little bit more now about what is IFS and how do they conceptualize our struggle, right? Okay. Yeah, there's a just making space for some questions in the comments as well. Chris is asking, would her road rage source beliefs and thoughts potentially been uncovered with the downward arrow? That's a really good question. I don't think I thought of that because it was anger. But we did do things about safety because she had talked about like, this is my fear, or like when I felt unsafe, I'm afraid like they would go so slow and we'd crash, and then it could kill me. And so we did uncover things like that with the what if. Underneath her anxiety, it was tied to safety, fear of death, fear of, you know, just like, and things ending her course of her life. But it never actually quite uncovered the depth of abandonment that she had experienced too. Right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let me go through some of these pieces and then I'll make some spaces for questions as well. Okay. So in IFS, there's basically three types of parts, but managers and firefighters are seen as protective systems. So managers and firefighters protect the system in different ways. And I really liked Frank Anderson's, one of our IFS trainers and writers. He says, like, if you could imagine it's like a beehive. The exile is the queen bee. This is the wounded part. And managers and firefighters are the worker bees that are working really hard to protect the queen at all costs. A lot of times they're tired, but they would do anything to protect the exile from feeling the wounds of rejection, abandonment, and that pain again. Okay, so managers and firefighters are protective parts, and exiles are those wounded parts that oftentimes we locked away because it's so painful to connect with it. So, a little bit more information on managers. I'm going to have you all connect with your own internal system and parts that show up. But how managers differ from firefighters, managers are protective parts that are proactive. Firefighters are more reactive. So if pain is triggered, firefighters will react in order to um, douse the fire from the pain or the hurt. Managers are more proactive. They run your day-to-day life. These are the parts of us that organize and plan and stay responsible and wants to be in control of situations and relationships. So it makes sure that we show up looking good and it makes sure that we show up to things on time and just organizes our lives. These are uh, parts that just help us to survive and to function on day-to-day life. And they want to show up well. They want to be socially acceptable, right? I want to function well. I want to perform well. And I want to show up well in relationships. So then I'm not getting any rejection or humiliation. And so then I can still protect any parts of me that are locked away from re-experiencing that hurt. So they often have this never again mentality. Never again will I allow myself to be in that space of feeling that level of humiliation, hurt, and rejection. And so I'll do all that I can to protect from it being re-triggered, and to gain social connection and acceptance. And then these parts of us often feel tired. And so if you looked at the handout, some of the examples can be like achieving parts, parts that overwork and work really hard to make sure that you accomplish things in your life. Parts that have really high standards that may show up as perfectionism. I'm seeing that in the chat. And whether it's a manager or a firefighter, sometimes it can look the same, but is it being used proactively or reactively, right? So we could say like someone who's working hard, that overachiever part that runs their day-to-day life to make sure they look successful can be a manager because it's proactive. I want to make sure I am well in the world. And it can also be reactive because think of someone who's then feeling like really hurt, wounded, and rejected, and then they start to work 16 hours a day and don't sleep as much because this helps them to escape. Then it becomes a firefighter. So it's just, is it being used proactively or reactively? And ultimately, it doesn't really matter. We do the same work with them and they serve a function to protect in the same way. Sorry, I don't know why it wasn't changing. Okay. And so as I said, firefighters are reactive, and you'll see a whole spectrum with them. So the wound may then get activated for whatever reason, because no matter how hard manager parts work, there may be moments from time to time where life is challenging, something's triggering, they get in a fight with their partner, and that wound is activated. Then another set of protective parts may show up, which is your firefighters. And you'll see a whole spectrum from more socially acceptable to more drastic and extreme firefighter parts. And more socially acceptable ones are when we turn to work, food, social media, shopping, we oversleep, maybe flirt, gamble, even seeing obsessions and compulsions as firefighters. Sometimes obsessions I've noticed can also be managers. These are obsessions that just really value safety and wanting to make sure I'm a certain type of person. And so that can also be a manager. And then there's more drastic, less acceptable firefighters. And just so there's awareness, the more extreme the firefighters, typically the greater the pain, the greater the trauma that they've experienced. And I really love and appreciate this compassionate view of the human existence that usually we only have extreme ways of showing up because there's extreme pain. And you're needing more desperate, drastic measures to douse the fire, to extinguish the hurt. And so that's when they may get into, like my client, rage, road rage that just felt like it came out of nowhere. You may self-mutilate, you may become suicidal because it's wanting to remove that pain and suffering from that person, right? Affairs, you may even think of extreme sexual compulsive behaviors. And this one is a little bit hard for people to swallow, but even like perpetrator parts may come from a space where at some point in time, it had actually really helped them to manage certain things, or they took on the energy of when they were abused. And then this perpetrator energy gave them some sense of power when they felt really powerless. Right? And they were a victim once, and then victimizing others is still better than being in a space where they were victimized. So. And what's interesting too with IFS that I really like is, oh, sorry, really looking at how it can address somatic symptoms. And it is so fascinating because we all know and we see the research of like stress and different things that we experience impacts our physical well-being, right? But when we look at it in terms of IFS and parts work, it's like there is a part of you when you're triggered that then actually may flare up your pain, illnesses, diseases that already exist. So of course, there are genetic diseases and illnesses, but when you're looking at it from the IFS lens, it's saying sometimes there's a part of you then that can use these physical symptoms then to actually help give you a voice or help you to cope or help you to just manage certain symptoms. And the really interesting thing that they found through the very first evidence-based research on IFS is a study on rheumatoid arthritis, which a lot of autoimmune diseases we talk about not really knowing the core source of it. but there may be a correlation with overwhelming hard life experiences and trauma for people. And so, in this study with people with rheumatoid arthritis, this was the very first study that put IFS on the map as an evidence-based treatment approach in 2013. Is as people were experiencing RA and the flare-ups of the arthritis in their joints, there was a control group and then there was an IFS group that then was able to explore that, oh wow, the pain is flaring up and it's actually my body's way of saying, slow down, take care of yourself. You can even see a hidden emotion. So through TEAM-CBT, we talk about anxiety tells you there's something that's bothering you right now that you're not addressing. The hidden emotion treatment approach of anxiety is just one of four. But this really feels like that to me, where it's saying, if my pain is flaring up, I'm having random neck pain, my RA is flaring up, my back is hurting, I keep getting sick. Usually I'm not, but I keep getting sick. Maybe there's something else going on. And as they were connecting with these parts of their systems of like, what's going on with the pain? What is it trying to protect? There were common themes about like, you're doing too much for others, you're not taking care of yourself. It's your body's wanting you to rest more. It's like screaming for you to rest and to do less, right? And then as they listen to these parts, and start to engage in a lot of that, by the end of this, many of the clients with RA went into remission from the IFS group versus the control group. And many of the outcomes lasted even at a year follow-up for improvements for the IFS group that went through, I believe, like 12 sessions of treatment, something along those lines compared to the control group. Their benefits still lasted at the 1 year follow-up. So it's pretty fascinating that there's a direct way to work with somatic symptoms and how that's connected to their emotional well-being too. So I have the link to that study on there if you want to click on that and read a little bit more about it. And when firefighters are extreme, there's just little regard for the body and for relationships because you can see it's just desperate. It's desperate to do whatever to escape the pain so the exile or the wounded part won't be activated again because it was such a deep source of pain. So when it gets extreme, you can see spaces where you drink to the point of having a cirrhosis of the liver. Your firefighter activities leading you to lose so many relationships. But in those moments, that's not the intentions of these firefighter parts. They're just desperate for escape to protect from pain. And then a common trait of firefighter parts is they do get really defensive when they feel under attack. And they often feel quite misunderstood. And so you may think of people that you've connected with or even clients. I think TEAM-CBT does a really beautiful job in helping these parts feel less defensive when we do like the triple paradox, right? What are the good reasons why this habit is here? What does it even show that you really value? It's very similar to parts work with why is this behavior showing up for you right now? And then it really helps them to decrease their defenses and then ultimately feel more understood because these parts often feel very misunderstood, shamed, judged, controlled by parts in their own system. Managers often, manager parts that want to appear well, often really hate the firefighter parts of them. So that's why we're talking about polarizations and internal conflicts today as well. Okay, and then the last pieces of parts before I make some room for Q&A are exiles. Exiles are those wounded parts and younger. So by younger, I don't mean they have to be children or teenage parts in your system. It's just younger than you are today because there can be adult exiles as well, especially when you've experienced a traumatic event that you feel like you need to disconnect from and lock away. That's then an exile that's younger than you, but it could be a younger adult or even something a week ago, right? Could be an exile that's a younger wounded part. And these are the parts of us that hold pain, deep shame, You may be able to connect with a moment in time as you look at that float back technique. If you attended my last webinar, through EMDR, these are just moments where when we do the float back, we're looking at certain parts in people's lives where there may be exiles. And so if you're feeling some sense of rejection and hurt today, and that's your moment in time, and you do the float back to the last time that you felt a similar sense of emotions and sensations and thoughts, that may be an exile from when you were 16 and rejected by a boyfriend. And then before that, it was when you were 8 and you were at like a camp and none of the kids liked you. And so that float back technique can really help us to explore the exiles in the system and the parts that just hold so much pain, helplessness, despair, worthlessness, holds a lot of trauma memories and may show up as nightmares, may show up as flashbacks. They say that's like the exiles trying to break through to say, like, hey, I'm still here. I'm still a wound that needs to healing. Carries a lot of sorrow. If clients are saying, I'm feeling empty, I'm feeling despair, I'm feeling worthless, it's usually an exile part that they're really connecting with or blended with. Yeah. Yeah, and so you'll see through a lot of these approaches, everyone has then pulled from different modalities that they've learned from. So you will see pieces of like Gestalt, you'll see pieces of union work in this in IFS. You know, Jung had talked about different parts, different things. You'll see ego states therapy, schema therapy in these processes. What I really like about IFS is how it pulls it all together and how we can work with it without interpreting anything from the client for the client, and how client guided it is, in addition to the unburdening process, is some of the most moving work that I get to witness. And I'll share that with you in May, the healing, the exiles, and unburdening process. Today, we're mainly looking at the protective system. Okay, so one other piece that's unique about IFS that I've really loved and connected with is it believes that there is a core self in all of us. And these are the moments where you may feel like, I'm really feeling like myself. And when we're in our core self or we're connected with our self energy, you may see some of these 8 traits. And Richard Schwartz just loves alliteration. And so he's used 8 C's. But self and self energy is not just the 8 C's, right? You don't have to look for the 8 C's. It's just a way that you show up. And when you connect with this core self of you, it feels like this feels like more genuinely just me in myself, in my state. So just think of moments when you may have felt just a great sense of calm come over you because none of your managers or firefighter parts are activated. And moments when you feel really connected with others and really compassionate, like you can feel someone else's pain and just really want to be there to relieve the suffering in the world. And spaces when you can be really creative and what that can do for you as you're curious. You have clarity about the next steps in life in the world for yourself. And you have spaces where you connect with courage. I'm taking risk. I'm doing hard things. It's scary. I may fall flat on my face, as you all know. I've connected with putting on a training recently. That's a conference in Oklahoma that then totally flopped. And it felt so crappy. Like, you know, by the time the early bird deadline, it was like 6 freaking people. Like, seriously, how did it go from this? How did it go from 60 to where like I'm going to be in total debt? And at the same time, as I was able to work through those achieving parts of me that were flaring up and feeling panicky and feeling inadequate, as that started to heal, then I felt like my core self was coming to surface again. And I just connected with the courage to let's just keep moving forward. And I had clarity about why this work matters anyway. Even if we're sharing it with lower numbers of people, I'm sharing tools that I have found personally healing for myself and for my clients. That's worth it. And then we can get in spaces of just feeling more connected, more confident within ourselves instead of being blended with those parts that feel so worthless or panicky or out of control. And I really love this view that this is the core of us, the core of human nature. And this is the part of us that's actually not a part, but the core of us that can actually lead the system, that can connect with all of our hardworking parts, all of our protective parts, and help them to heal. And then ultimately help to heal the wounded part. As you, as the therapist, is just the co pilot. It's actually the core self, once you establish this relationship with all of the parts of them that shows up, and those parts of them can then unburden and heal through, the core self starts to show up for everyone. And I've been actually really amazed since practicing this since May, so not even quite a year yet, 8 to 10 months or so. Like it is so true. Once the trauma and certain parts unblend, is what IFS calls, unblends and then heals through. Always, like what shows up is the client says, I feel um, more like myself. And then they say, like, I'm feeling like a sense of calm come over me. I'm feeling compassionate towards my wounded part. I'm feeling curious about why this part is so rageful instead of judgmental or critical of it. Um, if this part of you could heal, what would it want to do? And they would say, like, it wants to create. And like in connecting with a variety of different people, seeing that these components continue to show up every single time has been really powerful for me to see this model and to see that the core self is in every person. And IFS believes that once the core self leads us in our system, there's going to be greater balance and harmony. And then socially on the outside world too, there's more balance and harmony in our relationships and our connections as well. And what Dr. Frank Anderson believes is trauma blocks love. Those hard life experiences block self-energy and compassion and love, our ability to show up in the way that we want to in the world. And when we access love, it's going to heal trauma and those extreme reactions and those extreme responses that we have. So we can really get back into our core self and who we really are. An analogy I really love about the core self is that it's like, imagine that it's a stormy day. And the stormy day represents your trauma, your hard life experiences, all of the things that you have been through. And there's clouds, there's thunderstorms, there's hail. And once the storm clears, you do the healing work to clear that, the sun is always there, and that's your core self. And you will see the sun. It's untainted. It can't be impacted by these hard life experiences. And this is very different from even like attachment theory and things about like, we get to a space where we're so broken that we actually can't access health. We can't show up in a way that's loving. And we actually see that you don't have to receive a loving environment in order to actually show up in very loving, compassionate ways. That's actually just your innate being. That's your innate existence. And once you heal those hard life experiences, you'll see your true self. And this piece, I think, is just absolutely beautiful, allows us to see people more clearly. We can see extreme reactions that annoy us, disconnect us to be parts that showed up from hard life experiences. And then we know once people heal, this is the core self that shows up for everybody. Okay, so that is just an overview of IFS. And then I'm going to share with you my protective system, allow time for an experiential group exercise. And then my volunteer Jen is going to help us bring to life working with polarized parts that show up in our system. Okay, so let me make us a little bit of space for questions and thoughts about this process. What thoughts or questions do you all have so far? Oh, yeah, I'm seeing Tammy is sharing that about the sun not being impacted by hard life experiences. Parts are impacted, parts get extreme, but once they heal, the core self always shines through. Yep. Ooh, there's a deep question here about the core self from team perspective and the core self from the IFS perspective. Hmm. I'll have to think about that one because Dr. Burns talks about no self, and IFS and Dr. Schwartz talks about core self and no parts. And he believes like when people talk about like killing your ego, it means like working through and healing parts. And once we kill our ego, or if we see that as a little self, our core self is the capital S self that will show up. So we may see that through team as we heal certain parts. The no self is actually maybe killing parts or killing the ego. And I don't even want to use the term killing, but healing. Then there may be just this more free flowing existence of energy, of creativity, compassion, and connection that shows up. Because that's really what we want to get to through TEAM-CBT, too, right? Like once people heal through, we want them to be more able to feel free in the world, to exist with courage, with compassion, with connection to people and to themselves. So, yeah, people are connecting with the beauty of that philosophy, the compassion of it. Jeremy, is there much risk of getting started with IFS when you're still at the clumsy stage? Um, this is a tricky one. I think why the IFS Institute didn't, because I actually reached out to get permission to put on a 2-day workshop about IFS because like my heart just like exploded for this approach as I found the healing for some of my clients and for me personally. And they discouraged that until I got certified because they are concerned that people are just going to try to use these tools and then try to access exiles too quickly. And then what they call it creates a lot of backlash in the system where afterwards we moved the work too quickly. They could be suicidal. They could run a fever. Um, they could have migraines, like different things can show up, have panic attacks. And so IFS may have a word of caution around getting started in this phase. And I'm just going to fully disclose with you, that's how we all start, you know? I just read books. I just found it to be so interesting. I did some personal work and found like, oh, it's starting to create some shifts in me that I find to be interesting. And then I did that work with that woman. It was like so shocking how much of a shift it created for her road rage that then I was clumsily learning and going through it. And what I felt really good about is I felt like TEAM-CBT was such a respectful approach that we weren't just throwing tools at people. And so once I made sure I did testing, I made sure that we have a good relationship. I'm using empathy throughout to make sure there's safety and connection. I'm looking at resistance and really working with parts is all addressing resistance because it's all looking at positive intentions, just like positive reframing does. It's dangling the carrot. It's making sure we get permission from the system to move forward, just like we do with an invitation. I felt like TEAM-CBT set me up well enough to feel like I can do this work without a lot of backlash from the system. And once I did, of course, there were clumsy moments, but I haven't experienced once I use the team structure and we're not just throwing tools at people. I think sometimes there's that criticism of EMDR. While it's a really powerful approach, it may actually be going too quickly to the exiles before there's permission, an invitation. We're throwing a tool at it. We're trying to retrieve that exile and then have it be witnessed and processed through all of its trauma. And that may be too much for the system. So yes, there is that word of caution, but we all have to begin at the clumsy stage. And I can say that I did with awareness of safety, not rushing the work, getting permission from the system, doing invitations, that they're ready to do the work, right? And then it worked out just fine. So that's a great question. Can you define what team is? You're new to team. Yes, I have a slide on that. I didn't put it at the beginning since this is mostly like introducing a lot of IFS, but I'll share with you, there's a slide where I break down team a little bit more and how I think it really enhances the IFS process. Okay. Right. Let me see if there's anything else. There's probably more questions than I can answer here. Okay. If there's anyone with like a burning question, if you could open your mic and let me know. There's more questions than I can answer, and I'll answer them. I'll pull up the chat and I can answer them in email later. Okay. All right, so let's look at no bad parts. I'm just looking at the time. I'll share my own personal work with you through IFS, and then we'll do some experiential learning and wrap up with the demo. Okay. So there's the belief in IFS that there's no bad parts. And if you're familiar with TEAM-CBT, I really see positive reframing as no bad parts. Your symptoms are there for a reason. Your symptoms even serve you in some way, right? Like anxiety is there to protect something. Depression is there to try to give you a voice about something that really matters to you and connects you with sadness. There's motivations behind our feelings. Anger shows you care about justice and fairness. It drives you to speak up. Guilt then drives you to make amends, shows you have morals, shows you care about people's feelings. And it's the same thing with IFS where there's no bad parts. All protective parts have a positive intention for the system. And all of our parts and all of us as people have three primary desires. And so, again, they believe that if we establish a self-to-part relationship for the client, that is a very healing process. But it's also helpful that they can feel this from their therapist as well, because you're the co-pilot in helping with the healing. And so, what all of us want in the moment that we're connecting with these parts is to be heard and not judged, to be respected, to be considered, that you see me and you hear me, and to just be included in the process, to be appreciated. And so you can even imagine this is like dating. You're wanting them as they're meeting these parts of them to then create safety and to not rush the process and to just take some time to get to know these parts before you get to the vulnerability, right? You don't want to go on a first date and dive right into like, what's the worst thing that's happened? And let's go ahead and retrieve it so we can heal it. It's a very respectful process at the speed of trust. And when they're ready, we'll continue to move forward. But it's about getting to know these parts first and helping to establish that relationship for safety and trust. Yeah. Yeah. And again, there's that link to the article with the RA and healing it through IFS. But I do think it's really fascinating looking at autoimmune and trauma and just we know and we hear a lot about like when I'm really stressed out, I'm more likely to get sick, or when I'm having to face like holidays with the family, my system gets so activated that I'm breaking out in hives, right? It shows up somatically. So we know there's some intuitive link between around that. I'd love to see more solid research too. So let me share with you in this process, I think IFS is meant to be experienced, not learned about cognitively. So experiencing it from the client that received like that healing of her road rage was so powerful for me to witness. But what was even more powerful was my own healing work in this process. So I have a child exile and an adult exile that I've been working on. And what I connected with was so many of my parts that show up. These are my protectors here. And when I first learned this, I just then did consultations and then I did some personal work around this, right? And then I'm seeing there were parts that were afraid to trust the therapist. I didn't want her to judge me. And then what showed up was like, this is the part of me that wanted to really achieve and like not go to vulnerable spaces. I had a part of me that just wanted to cover up flaws, cover up imperfections, and was even hesitant for the therapist to know like some of my struggles. And so that was my what I'm calling an achiever part. That's how it showed up. And as we connected with that, um, in doing the work, I then connected with this 8-year-old wounded exile. And this was just a wounded part of me that I've was aware of, but never really connected with in this way. And what was powerful for me with IFS was really visualizing these parts of me that showed up. And why this was a wounded part is our family came to America from Vietnam when I was 6 years old. And through this process, we're immigrants just working to try to adjust, try to acculturate, trying to survive in a new country where we don't know the language. And I started attending this youth group, this Buddhist youth group, and experienced just a lot of, from my sense, like just discrimination and shunning. And so a lot of times people think like, for someone of a racial minority, you're experiencing discrimination from like maybe people of other races. But for me, it was actually the worst from Americanized Vietnamese people. Like I felt like such a source of shame. And so we have a term called a fob. Fob stands for someone who's fresh off the boat, um, someone who's not acculturated, right? And so when I look at myself, when I connected with this part, I saw just this little girl in a dark space, and it was like so weird because it felt like projections from my subconscious, but it felt so vivid, like watching a movie. So my therapist is saying like, okay, she's worked with some of my protectors. Would they give permission for us to see who they're protecting? And then once they were willing to do that, she said, let them create a healing circle around you. And I did. And then what showed up was this little girl. And it was me, but she was covering her face. And she had like greasy hair. Um, and my therapist then wanted to make sure that myself was present, the capital S self. So she's assessing, um, is there self energy there? How are you feeling towards this part? And when we ask how are you feeling towards this part, we're wanting to make sure they're connected with their core self. So they're feeling curious towards it, compassionate. Because if they're feeling angry, disgusted, anything else with that part, that just shows like there's more protectors here that you need to get to know and get permission from before you move forward with addressing the wound. But once we worked with all of those parts, I was able to see this little girl, and she was then able to share with me, just from questions that I asked, what would you want me to know about what you experienced? What was this like for you? Things came up like, I feel so ugly. I don't know why no one likes me. Um, and I, from my core self, could come back and just really feel so much compassion, like I'm crying from the beginning of the session to the end of the session, just connecting with the depths of the loneliness. And I must say, I've never fully had the full insight of how much this had impacted me. And up until I was about 20, I almost never even shared much about myself, about my struggles with my family. My friends would know me, they would know certain struggles, but they would never actually quite know the depths of like, my dad has a drinking problem. They knew like things about my mom can be hypercritical, things that we can share more openly, but things that were like sources of shame and hurt, how rejected I felt in this setting. I've never really explored that or shared that with people. And I actually didn't even know the impact of this wound, to be honest with you, until I did this work. And this is after years of doing a lot of personal work and self-awareness work too. I'm just hearing some background noise and I'm just trying to mute everyone. Okay, give me 1 second. I think sometimes people don't realize they accidentally unmuted, so I'm just gonna mute all participants here. Okay, I know that can be a bit frustrating. Okay, and then so what I had saw in this work was she then as I approached her and what they call like we're just witnessing the experience, we're connecting with this part. And this is just us working with these inner parts and creating a relationship. And I just see this as like just connecting with those wounds, but in a visual way that then makes it come to life. So then we could really witness it through and hear its struggles. And it was so fascinating to me. She had a blue dress. She felt ugly. She was covering her face. And then as I was exploring what this was like for her, making space to connect, my subconscious just gave me the image that she no longer was covering her face. She was just sitting there and sad in her little blue dress with white flowers. I don't know where that visual came from. And then during that work, like more protectors came in. I had like a little girl in like an orange dress who was like humorous. She was like being goofy and she was like, oh, it wasn't that bad and just like screw it all and just move on. So then I became aware of this humor part of me that minimizes hurt, tries to cheer my parents up when they're hurting, um, minimizes things that I've been through laughing about it, right? And humor can actually be a beautiful part of a core self energy. But when it's used to minimize pain or minimize wounds, then it can actually be a firefighter. So it's not so much what's showing up, it's how it's being used. That may be a part of that process of identifying, is this core self humor that's then healing and connecting, because humor can really do that? Or is it being used to actually numb out pain or minimize pain? Then it's a firefighter that we may need to work through. And then as we continued the healing work and she's being retrieved from that place, I saw the blue girl dress and that humorous girl merge. And then they had this yellow dress. And I just told my IFS therapist, I said, this is really weird. I just don't get what's going on with these dresses. I'm not even a big dress person, right? And she said, well, why don't you ask those parts? Our subconscious has a lot of wisdom. And so I just did. It's still kind of weird to have this internal dialogue with your parts, but I said, what information do you have for me about these dresses? And I saw a visual of me being in Vietnam as a 5-year-old little girl, just being like so free. I forgot I had this yellow dress that I love so much. Oh, and it made me cry just seeing that visual, because what came up was like, this is when you felt free, like you could just be yourself. And you weren't in spaces where you just felt like completely not good enough, you know, like a loser, fully rejected, ashamed. I had a friend who then was like my only friend in that youth group. And then she suddenly stopped talking to me and I didn't understand why. And so in these spaces where we have these hard life experiences, we could see these other parts show up to try to protect us. And so that was the humor part. I later on like developed anger, like why are people discriminating against people who are fresh immigrants? We didn't have money. My parents had like $110. And so of course we had hand-me-down clothes. I had the bowl haircut. Um, and it made me angry why, people were discriminated against for things they couldn't change. And so I would really be reactive to messaging of you're not good enough. And I would have this active, angry part. I remember in 3rd grade, a teacher like asked questions and I kept raising my hand, but then she would ignore me and then have the other kids answer. And I stood up and I slammed the table. I said, I had my hands up first, and kind of shocked myself. And so you may have these moments where you see like, oh my gosh, this part of me just like flared up. And I didn't even realize this has been a protector that's been around for so long, trying to protect me from feeling rejected or less than. or, not seen. I felt like that teacher wasn't seeing me, so I got angry. And this angry part then would also like protect my friends who identified as gay or whatever else that they couldn't change and they received discrimination against. I would really have this part be active to try to protect people from hurt in that as well. And through that process, it's just like do everything that I can to take care of parents so they could be proud. And this achiever part has been working so hard and has been so active in my system. It wanted to eliminate all sources of wounding, like let me de-Asianize, right? Get rid of my ugly fob bangs and my bowl haircut, do my best to remove my accent. And for a long time, even as I was texting, if I had a typo, I would feel this anxiety, like, oh my gosh, what if they think I'm stupid? What if they thought I can't speak English and then they'll tell me to go back to my own country? And so you may have parts like that that you didn't realize was connected to the wound, but it's there and it's active for good reason. It's been protecting you. It's been in your system for a very long time. And I want to do an experiential exercise too to really allow you to connect with your own system in this process. Okay. So thank you for making space to allow me to share about one of my exiles. And gosh, the healing process, like I'm learning about memory consolidation. And I think Team CBT does this too, where we do the old story with the negative thoughts and our new story with the positive thoughts that just is based in complete truth. I can see that wounded girl that felt so ugly and was curled up and covering her face, just felt so unlovable, ashamed. And through the unburdening and healing process, like there was this visual of just me standing there in my yellow dress as those two parts healed. Um, and like my hair was no longer greasy. It was weird because the first one had greasy hair. I guess that was a source of shame too, like being poor and whatever else. But I have that, and then I have the image of the healing, like of the spaces where I can show up differently. And then there's the visual of like there's the sunlight that's on me, that's healing. It cleansed my hair, it cleansed burdens that I've taken on. Like I'm not good enough. I have to earn my place in the world. Um, I have to earn love because me as I am, in like any pieces of Asian identity needs to be discarded. I just felt all of that through that unburdening visualization start to just melt away in my system. And I think it's powerful to have those visuals of like, there's the wound, and then there's a healing space that you can really have and to connect with. And to this day, I can still see visuals of that visualization of the healing. And I'm walking in nature, and my fingers are just touching the ferns. And that's how I was as a little girl, as a 5-year-old. We just explored the village. There was so much freedom. There was no fear of like kidnappers or anything. I loved exploring nature. I loved exploring like fruit trees. I remember eating like wild berries and tomatoes until I threw up. Um, but in this healing space, I just saw myself in that, and my hands are on the ferns and I see balls of light on it. I still have that visual, and every time I connect with it, it feels so healing and so connecting. And so I can't wait to share more with you about the unburdening process of the exiles starting in May. But that's just a little preview for that. And then I want to have you right now also explore your system. So this is going to be an experiential exercise. And with everything that we do, just know that it's optional. Really trust your system as well. If you're not feeling like, oh, I want to make space to have awareness or insight, right now for my system, don't feel like you have to follow along. But if you feel like this could be beneficial for you all to connect with, for yourself, I'm going to do an experiential exercise with you right now. Okay. Yeah, thank you for all of your kind notes. I'm not able to read through all of it, but I appreciate the space. I feel the connection with everyone too. Okay, so working with our protective systems, I want you to just take a moment, and if it feels helpful to you, you can just turn your focus inward, but just take a moment to connect with any moment in time when you found yourself struggling. And you may start to notice parts of you that had shown up in this moment. Right? So just take a moment to focus and choose one moment in time of struggle. And just notice what parts of you are showing up right now. And as you connect with those parts, see, are there parts that have been working hard for you for a long time to try to make sure you show up well in the world, manage your day-to-day life to make sure that you're achieving and functioning and succeeding? Are there parts that are tired from having to work so hard? And in this moment of struggle, too, when life gets hard and some of these difficult parts get activated, are there parts that are trying to cope with the pain? And just be aware of those. What do you then do to try to ease pain, numb out pain, or escape from pain? As you see these parts of you, see if any one of them needs your attention first. Just get real specific and connect with your system. Is there any one of the parts that needs your attention first right now that just needs a little bit more space to feel heard and understood as to why it's there? And focus your attention internally on this part. How is it showing up for you? Is there a sensation in your body? Do you have a visual of this part of you? See, how do you feel towards this part as you focus on it right now? See if you can access spaces of compassion, curiosity for this part to get to know it better. And if there's another part showing up, that may be a part that needs your attention. So if there's another part that's like, I'm angry with this part, or I feel disgusted with this part, I feel concerned or
Why are
scared.
they so fat? Because they drink Mountain Dew.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to mute all again. Please make sure if you could make sure you're staying muted, that would be really helpful. Yeah, so how do you feel towards this part? And if there's anything other than feeling some of those 8C energies towards it, it's probably just another part of you that needs your attention. A part that's holding fear or a part that's holding disgust. Maybe you could turn your attention to that part and see if there's any concerns in the system with focusing on this part. And if you found yourself to be in a space of being curious or compassionate towards the part, feeling good and calm about moving forward, then we'll continue. If your system's feeling like something's showing up and I'm not in that space of feeling that self energy, well, let's listen to that in your system. This may not be the time to do some of this work. And now we're gonna connect with this part that you're focusing on, the part that needs your attention, and see if it can feel your presence there. And if you are feeling curiosity, compassion, care towards this part, go ahead and extend it to that part. See if that part can feel your presence and your care. And just get to know it a little bit better. Ask this part, what would you like for me to know? What have you been trying to do for me? How do you like doing this job? If you don't like doing this job, what are you afraid of would happen if you stopped doing this job? Are you protecting someone in there? How old are you? Anything else you want me to know about your job? What you're doing? Continue to see if you have a visual of this part or how it's showing up. Continue to connect with it, make space for the presence. See how you're feeling towards it now as you learn more from it. And if you're feeling more curiosity or connection, go ahead and send that towards that part of you and see how it responds. And if what it's sharing with you makes sense, let it know. That makes sense. Makes sense you've had to do this job or you've had to work this hard. I'm here to listen. Anything else you want me to know about your fears? What you're afraid would happen if you didn't do this job? Then we'll pause there. I just want to make some time for some processing of this. And also know that if this resonates with you, you can make more space to get to know these parts of you better and why they've shown up and who they're protecting. So if that resonates with you, you can just let these parts of you know, like, I'll be back to continue this work. And we're just pausing right now and even send these parts of you a lot of appreciation for showing up, for giving you some insights about your system and what's going on there. And when it feels right, we'll just come back into the space where I just want to make a little bit of space for anyone who would like to share. Was there anything that showed up for you that you then had more insight about? What this was like for you? Because sometimes it can be a little bit odd at first as we're connecting with our internal world in this way, right? And seeing these parts of us visually too. And at the same time, it's some of the most powerful connections and insights I've ever made in this process. Tasha, yeah, this is my kind of therapy. I would do this for myself. Yeah, this really resonated with me too as well. Tasha. I've loved Team CBT. I've gotten a lot of healing out of it. And this is just an additional piece of like a different angle of coming at the healing work that's really resonated with my system. The visuals, there's something about that, I think, that becomes a really cool tool that we can add to our arsenal. Yeah, some people may have had a sad part that they're accessing that can be important to make space for. What is that about? What's showing up with the sadness? And if the sadness is coming from a wounded part, maybe there's something it wants you to know, but then let it know you'll be back into connecting with it. Right. Mhm. Yeah, what type of person? So there's a question here. What type of clients or diagnosis would be a good fit for this? I've tried this now with almost all of my clients. Just as I'm learning things, I really like to practice to really see the process. The clients that don't resonate with it, um, I don't continue to force this tool onto them. I see it as just one tool. We have so many tools that may resonate with them. I had a client who had like ADHD and was really distracted, and it was very hard for him to connect with this process. And even when we were working with the distracted part, like, is this a part that's trying to numb him out from something vulnerable? It just really didn't resonate. And so that didn't feel like a good fit for me. And then I just did like a continuing the what I've been doing with Team CBT, and that felt much better for him. But pretty much almost everyone else, various diagnoses, trauma, anxiety. I've done this work with OCD. It was so beautiful. Oh, the most recent work I did with a man who engaged in self-harm, especially when OCD was really active, would harm himself. Um, and I don't want to say too much just for confidentiality's sake and to protect identity. But what was so beautiful is as he connected with this part of him, he realized like my OCD part that's so scared is actually a young boy that dad told dad told me I had to be perfect and really shamed me for mistakes. And he saw that young boy and how scared he was to actually make mistakes and to potentially hurt people. And from that connection, he no longer harmed himself. Like this was one session of just, let's see this part of you. How is it showing up? And we're still working with OCD through ICBT and combining it with IFS. But just from this one work, an OCD diagnosis stopped the self-harming because he's like, I don't want to hurt this young part of me anymore. It's like to me, like stabbing a little kid or burning a child. I no longer want to do that. So it's just created this beautiful space of compassion for how this part is showing up. And then he no longer self-harmed. And then we were actually more effective in being able to continue to work through the OCD. So I think it's worth a try with anyone who's sharing, like, anything like this and this and this is going on in my week. I'm feeling anxious about this. I'm feeling sad and depressed about that. And then we can just share with them, I'm hearing there's a part of you that's feeling anxious and another part that's feeling really sad about this. Another part's feeling carrying some like conflict. Any of these parts of you feel like it would need your attention first right now. Um, and then if they're interested in this tool that feels a little bit different, but can help them to have more insight about their internal state and heal through, then I move forward with it, right? So I don't think it has to be a certain type of person, is basically what I'm saying. And while I'm learning, I've just tried different aspects of it with everyone. And a few don't resonate, but almost all have gained some benefit from connecting and slowing down and seeing their parts in this way. Okay. Anyone wanted to share about the experiential experience, though? I'll make some other room for questions towards the end. And maybe it's too big of a setting. Oh, Julie, I see your hand up now. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you so much. This has been so beautiful. I really appreciate it, especially the vulnerability that you shared about the parts of you. It's really, I'm just moved and touched.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah. Um, I I'm actually surprised in a way how easy it was um,
Mm,
to connect to a part of me. Like I was thinking about, um, there's I have a tendency to like when I'm particularly stressed out to like I have a lot of numbing behaviors. I have a lot of ways of
mhm.
checking out.
Yeah.
And like I kind and I see it like through like Team and other tools. I've seen it as, what's been really helpful with that and what's been really protective about that
Mm,
um, today. But I think by just in this moment, I went back to, a really early childhood part of me who learned that behavior and
yep.
just sat with a lot of compassion and love and caring and acceptance of that
Mm, mm,
early childhood part. And
mm,
I found myself just sitting there with my eyes closed, getting very tearful. And it just was so sweet. And I noticed that there was
nice.
like kind of a very protective part also that came up that was really kind of pissed off on behalf of that. And so like I
Mhm,
sort of just had to like ask it to step aside and thank it for
mhm,
caring and, that deal with it later. But it was, such
right.
a brief moment in time, but really just so
Mhm.
touching. So thank you.
That's really beautiful. Thank you, Julie, for sharing that on
Yeah.
recognizing when I'm stressed, there's parts of me that wants to check out. I think so many of us relate to that, if not all of us. And then able to see through this process as you connect with this part is probably started at a certain age and is even protecting a more vulnerable part from your childhood, and spaces to give compassion for it can just be so moving and sweet and powerful. And what we see with this is when we can make those connections and make sense of it, we no longer then feel like we're just crazy, stupid, shameful. It makes no sense why I do this. It then all actually makes a lot of sense. And then we can have a lot of compassion for it and deal with it in a different way. And actually to help it heal through if it feels like it's too extreme or it's more than we would like.
Yeah.
But
I think part of the
it has
reason
to feel
why
heard
it worked,
first. Mhm.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think it helps also. I think sometimes with Team, I feel very connected to my intellectual space, like my head space. I think this really quickly brought me down to a heart space,
agree.
which was really nice.
Mhm.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that insight. Going from a lot of headspace, even a lot of our tools, I think, can go to that gut level change when we're doing role plays and things. But there's something just a little bit of a quick shift when we go inward in this way that it goes quickly to a heart space and can create that gut level connection. Right. Yeah, really appreciate you sharing that and helping us to bring that to life too, Julie. Okay, I'm noticing the time and we have 30 minutes. And I just want to briefly go over what I'm talking about with internal conflicts and polarized parts, and then bring the process to life with Jennifer, who's so generously volunteered for this process. So thank you, Jen. I appreciate you. And let me just quickly go through this. Okay. So what I did with you was just the 6 Fs to connect with the protective system. So parts that want to check out or parts that's been working hard to make sure you feel accepted in the world and survive in the world, right? And the Hope Merchant is basically just that bridge into working with the exiles. So usually there's several fears. Like I'm afraid once I get to the wound, it'll be too overwhelming. I'm afraid once I get to the wound that it can't actually heal. Um, I'm afraid that things can't change. And so, what Richard Schwartz did is when we become a hope merchant, we're just instilling hope for them that there can be a different way. I don't really love the word merchant, and I don't really love the terms dangling the carrot either. But I like we're just instilling hope. We're instilling hope that there can be a different way. There is ways to deal with overwhelm with the system. We can actually ask wounded parts to not overwhelm the system. I've seen that work. Um, like, hey, we're here to listen to what you've experienced, but if you could um, dial it down just a little bit in the intensity, Mary can be there to hear you out a little bit better. And then we actually see that intensity be dialed down and let it know there can be a different way and that we have seen people with very similar systems heal the wound, or I believe that the wound can heal. We've seen that process for people, right? Okay, so that's the Hope Merchant. And then I'll share about exile work next week. This is the slide on team. I'm still doing testing every single session with people to assess their internal state. I want to make sure we're connecting. Through my IFS training, I'm hearing people say, like, I've gone to an IFS therapist and then they just said, like, oh, let's connect with your parts. What are your parts telling you? And they're like, whoa, I barely even know you, and you're just wanting to like dive right into my system, and that's just not connecting. I had a group member in my IFS training who said, I saw that therapist twice. I'm just like, no, I it's not effective. I don't even trust you, and you're being quite intrusive into my system. And why team really helps with that is we can see immediately if this work was effective. We're making space to let them give us feedback. I think that is so powerful to give our clients a voice about what's resonating, what's not, so we can adjust according to the feedback. That's how we learn and grow. And we see like it's not even about the modality that's most effective for people. Is the therapist humble, willing to be adaptive, willing to take clients' feedback, not assume that you're empathizing well without asking your client, because it's their perceptions that matter, not yours, when it comes to assessing empathy and effectiveness, right? And then I think the 5 secrets are powerful. What's been fascinating to me is like during the demos with these master trainers, the therapist also wants to be in their core self, where they feel compassion, curiosity for the client, removement of judgment. They actually use a lot of the 5 secrets and they don't even know it. Like they're disarming, they're saying like, that makes sense. And I really admire you being here. So there's affirmations, they're connecting with feelings. But I think just an awareness of the 5 secrets is usually really helpful. We could do a little bit more self-disclosure, I think. I think that helps clients' systems feel a bit safer. And then before I throw this tool at them, it's like any tool in TEAM-CBT, I want to address any anticipated process resistance. So sometimes role play methods feels weird for clients. This internal dialogue visual method may feel weird to them. I see it as like time projection combined with an internal double standard. And I just share with them, I have this tool that I think could be really cool to help you gain insight about what's going on with this anger or this conflict that's coming up for you. It can be a little bit different than what you're familiar with, because I'm going to have you connect internally with what's showing up. But I'm wondering if you'd be interested in trying this new tool. So I just want to address that anticipated process resistance with dangling the carrot and letting them know it is a little bit different before I just throw it at them on like, let's go inside and connect with your parts and what's showing up. I think that's too abrupt. And this also just adds a layer of getting permission from the system. Okay. And what I'm demoing with you is any moment when we have an internal conflict in IFS, we can see that there's 2 parts in the system right now. One part may want to stay in a relationship and another part wants to go and is feeling angry about it. One part wants to stay in this job and another part may actually want to explore and actually live out dreams, is afraid that you'll settle for safety versus meeting your potential, right? And so these parts of us, they call polarized parts. And we're just working with polarizations, having a meeting place for both of these parts, imagining it's like family therapy, but internally. This is why it's internal family systems. There's family members fighting. That's not effective. And we want their core self to be the mediator, to listen to both parts, to create connection with them and help them sort out this conflict. And I, as the therapist, I'm just the co pilot. I'll feed them some things to ask the system and just making sure there's that self energy that's present because that's when it's more healing, when there's not just like anger, annoyance, disgust with these internal parts of them, but there's spaces for curiosity and compassion and care for parts that show up. So we just do then the 6 F's with it, which you all went through the experiential experience there. And now I'm bringing this to life with Jennifer. Okay, these are just the 2 polarized parts here. One that I recently worked with was my achiever part, and then a part of me that was really wanting to hibernate and no longer wanted to work so hard. And that was also quite powerful for me to see both of these parts, and that the achiever part was actually a young part that was just afraid of rejection. Then I could actually have more compassion for that part instead of annoyance. And then my hibernator part was actually a wiser, older part that says, like, let's savor life. You no longer have to earn your place in the world, and you can slow down, and you don't have to um, fear the rejection that you had anymore. Right? So that was my polarization. And now we're going to connect with Jennifer's. So just to let you know, Jen, if this is a big group, right? It's 140 people that you're sharing your system to with us. Really appreciate you doing that. I know that's vulnerable work. And one cool thing about IFS that I really love is that you don't actually have to share anything externally that you don't want to. And the healing work can still move forward and to take place as long as you're sharing, making space for the parts of you to share it with your core self. That's all that matters. And so, similarly to EMDR and IFS, it's if a client has a trauma that feels too vulnerable, too overwhelming for them to share with you as the therapist, we can just really make space to respect that. And we can let them know, like, you don't have to share anything that you're uncomfortable with me. I will make space for that if you want to, and if that feels helpful. But actually, the healing piece is that you share and just make space for that with your core self. That you just make room for these parts of you that have been stuck to share it with your core self, and the healing work can continue to take place. So I know you're feeling a little bit concerned, like if it goes to vulnerable places, how much to share, how little to share. And I just wanted you to know that. How's that feeling like for you to know that you don't have to share anything that feels too vulnerable, and that it can still be very helpful work to just allow your system to share it with yourself.
Yeah, no, it's comforting to hear. I think I did sort of um, have a little realization of that, that whatever comes up, that I wouldn't have to. But at first I was concerned about it if that would result in it not being a helpful process,
Mhm.
for
Yeah,
people, for learning.
yeah.
Yeah, but thank you so much.
I just really appreciated that because I could tell you cared about the experience of the participants and wanting to make sure that it was helpful. And a lot of times I just want to share with clients too, to let them know, because they're obviously not being observed, but there are certain things that feel so painful or challenging. Like I had a client who was sexually abused by her father that was just like, some parts are just too much. And I can be a witness to that internally, but sharing externally is too much. And that healing work can still be quite powerful. So
Mm.
just appreciating just this as a teaching moment to be able to share that with them, to give them space to respect their system, to share as much or as little as they want, and to know the healing work can still take place and be very effective equally. So
Yeah, thank you.
um, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your system with us. And if you could share with the group a little bit more about the internal conflict that you're experiencing and
Yeah.
what are the two parts that are showing up for you. And maybe there's even more than two for some people with polarizations.
Right. Yeah, I didn't have great clarity. This was a concern for me too, that it
Mhm.
wouldn't be helpful if I didn't have
Yeah.
great clarity, but maybe I'm sure you'll be able to help if needed. But
Mhm.
definitely I wanted to work with my anxiety. I mean, that's my biggest thing, as I had mentioned to you. What felt like my biggest internal conflict right now is whether or not to travel this summer, which would be with my husband and sons. And my anxiety, I've done lots of wonderful work over the years. I used to have panic attacks, and I've done a lot of work on it. And what I'm left with in recent times is this fear of traveling still. I mean, the fear of traveling overseas, especially, for such a long flight. Um, so there's there's that as a part, the anxiety about and what would come up. Yeah, wait, let's see. So there's lots of parts here, I guess.
Mhm.
The
You're
anxiety
good.
itself, and then there's the part of me that wants to be able to go, that thinks I should go. There's also a part of me that wants to stay and actually would love to be at home alone for however long. But that's only during the day. I would like the daytimes, but the night times, it's almost as scary as the travel itself. The idea of being in the house by myself without them, and I could have some anxious nights, I suppose, is the fear there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Um, Jennifer, thank you first for just making space to share about your fears with us in this group. And just what I'm hearing is several parts. The main conflict is like whether I should travel this summer or not, especially overseas. And one part is feeling like some fear about traveling that far. And another part is saying like, I'm afraid to travel, but I want to go and thinks I should go, right?
Right.
And then there's the other part that's like, I think I should stay at home. That sounds really nice during the daytime. Getting to be alone, that sounds really nice for me too, as a mom, to have spaces to myself. It feels wonderful. And at the same time, you're saying with this option, there's another anxious part coming up that, oh, but at nighttime, that doesn't feel comforting. That feels anxiety provoking, being
Mhm,
alone at home without them, right?
mhm,
And so what's showing up is one part wants to go, another part wants to stay, and there's fears with both of them.
mhm.
There's good reasons for both, and then there's fears with both of them. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh. And I'm wondering if it could feel helpful to you to make some space to actually connect with both of these parts of you, one part that wants to go, one part that wants to stay, but then it's activating some fears with either option. If it could actually be helpful for us to make space to connect with both of these parts and just to hear them out.
Mhm. Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. I wonder if we could just take a moment for you to connect with both of these parts of you, the part that wants to go and the part that wants to stay. There's some fears activated with both of those options as well. Right? And I'm wondering how many parts you're seeing show up as you connect with this decision.
Yeah, the first and strongest feels like the fear of the anxiety.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's the biggest and the strongest.
Yeah, which one is this one? Fear of the traveling this far, especially overseas, or is it the fear and anxiety with being home at night alone without your family?
It's more the fear of traveling and the fear of the anxiety that I would feel potentially
Mm,
in anticipation of it, of the travel.
mhm. Got it. Yeah, and then can you see if you could go ahead and create a meeting space that feels good for your system for these parts to show up? Right now, there's a part that's afraid of traveling
Mhm.
because of the anxiety that would come up.
I just realized it's not the anxiety, it's more the fear right now.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
just the fear of traveling.
Mhm. So I'm sorry, you said create a meeting place
Yeah, you can create a
for the
meeting
fear.
space. For some people, they actually have a meeting room. For others, I've seen create a bonfire, a coffee shop, whatever makes for a comfortable conversational space for you,
Mhm.
for your system,
Outdoors is good.
a space outdoors. Yeah.
Yeah.
See if the fear of traveling part would be willing to show up, and to also connect with the part that wants to stay home.
Yeah,
And
as
then
soon as
maybe
you said that, the fear of traveling part shows up as an adult and then shrinks down into a child. Should I be saying it as I go along, what's coming up, or
Mhm.
is it better if I don't and just notice it for myself?
Oh, no, that's great. Yeah. So you're saying you're seeing that part that's afraid of traveling. I'm
Mhm.
wondering, is it the same part that wants to stay home?
Does it feel like the same part?
Mhm. So there's a fear of traveling part. There's a part that wants to stay home. There's another part that wants you to go. Do I hear that right? There's actually
Yeah.
maybe three parts there.
There's the part of being afraid to go.
Mhm.
There's the part that wants to stay home, which feels like a happier part.
Mm.
And there's the fear that I guess that fear of traveling is very similar or the same as the one that's feels afraid of staying at home alone.
That
And
feels
that,
like the same part that's afraid to travel is the same part that's afraid to
yeah,
actually stay at
yeah,
home
it's
alone.
afraid of the feelings that could come up
Mhm.
with either traveling or staying home.
Mm. Yeah,
So of
great.
course, then there's a part that's angry that I'm even in this position
Mhm.
about having to make this choice.
Yeah, yeah. I'm hearing that angry part, and that makes sense that it wish you didn't have to struggle to make that choice. And can you
Mhm.
see if that angry part would be willing to just create a little bit of space so we can get to know these two parts a little bit better and maybe even come to a resolution as it may be hoping for? Would it be willing to do that?
Oh, I'm sorry. You meant make space so that we can get to know the two parts of the fear and which
Yeah.
other part?
I'm hearing there's a part that's afraid to go, which is actually similar to the part that's afraid to stay home. It's actually the same part that's showing up these fears.
Mhm.
And there's another part that wants to stay home that's actually a happier part.
Okay, yeah, got it.
Those are the two main parts that I'm hearing, right? That
Yeah,
feel
yeah. I think it's
polarized.
time for the anger not
Mhm.
to be there. Yeah, to step out.
Yeah. And then where the anger is showing up at this process. And so I'm just seeing if anger would be willing to just make a little bit of space and observe the process, but step back a little bit,
Mhm.
relax a little bit back just so we can get to know these two parts and maybe even allow them to come to a resolution to understand them better.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm. Right. Okay. Do you have a visual or how do you see the other part, the part that wants to stay home, that's the happier part?
Yeah, it feels um like like it's myself and kind of there's just such a lightness to it. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of ambition about all the things I would get done.
Mm, mhm.
And just, yeah, like positive. And
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So there's this part that wants to stay home, is a happier part, feels there like there's lightness, wants to accomplish things, has
Mhm.
ambition.
Mhm.
And it's there also with the part that's afraid,
Mhm.
afraid to travel, afraid to stay at home at night. Can you see both of those parts there?
Yeah.
Mm.
Maybe just a moment so I can visualize it more. Yeah.
How are you feeling towards both of these parts as you see them there?
Um, well, I feel so sad for the fear and the younger part.
Yeah.
And I guess also compassion, one of the C's.
Mm,
Um, of wanting, like just acknowledging that that part is here and um, wanting to be able to help it.
mm,
And then um, toward the other part, it's not real strong feelings. It's like kind of neutral, I guess.
mhm. Yeah. Great. Yeah. So you're feeling some sadness that actually comes with compassion and wanting to help that fear part that feels like a young part. And then just present with the other one, feeling neutral towards it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So when you connect with both of these parts, um, which one needs your attention first? Let both of them know, like, we're
I'm
here
sorry.
to help them. No, you're good.
Can you go in the other room, buddy? Thank you.
Okay.
Little interruption. Okay.
You're good.
Do this.
Mhm.
Um,
The life of a mom, right?
yeah.
Try and do self-care and learn, and we deal with the
I
interruptions for sure.
I thought I had told them. Gave the warning. Maybe you can just say some of the last thing that you said,
Mm.
please.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, we're just taking a moment to connect with both of these parts. There's the
Mhm.
fear part that you're feeling some compassion and sadness for, wanting to help. The part that wants to stay home, you feel neutral towards. And we're
Mhm.
just letting them know we're here to help
Mhm.
and to listen and to understand them a bit better. See if that would be okay with both of those parts.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good.
Yeah. Which one of them feels like they need your attention first? Let them know we want to hear from both,
Mhm.
but we'll be more effective just listening to one at a time, and we want to make space for both of them.
Yeah. Well, definitely the younger part, is feels like it's needing more attention, the fear,
Mhm.
and it also feels more scared, sort of getting the
Mhm.
attention.
It feels a little scared. Yeah.
Yeah, the fear feels fear.
Hmm. Yep. Of
Yeah.
course. It's scared. Maybe it's even unfamiliar with the attention. See if you could send it your care. You said your desire to help, your compassion towards it. See how it responds to that.
Yeah, it softens it. Yeah, it just feels like there's a lot of other things there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you just ask it, what would it like for you to know?
Mm. I'm sorry. I was interrupted again and I kind of lost it, but you said to
Mhm.
ask it what, I'm sorry, maybe you can say it again.
Oh, you're good. The
What would it
spirit is
like me
feeling
to
some
know?
fear, and you're saying, oh, it's actually softening as it's
Mhm.
sensing my presence and
Mhm.
care and compassion for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it seems like it's at a space where it's softening,
Mhm.
open to the conversation. And so I'm just letting it know, like, you're here to listen to it, you're here to help it. And what would it like for you to know?
Feels, it feels very much connected. I mean, I've felt this already, but the feeling, is that this is the grief.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This fear is feeling like grief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like there's a lot of emotions there with it, besides the fear.
Yeah. And I just want to let your system know, Jen, I'm noticing the time and
Yeah.
I have the space to actually connect a little bit more, but just wanting to give permission for people if they need to go. It's supposed to wrap up at 4. They can, and then there will be the rest of the recording for this, but I also want to respect your time. I'm thinking just to flesh out and to just make a little bit more space since it's grief that's showing up underneath this fear. I wonder if it's actually important to make a little bit more room for her. So I'm feeling torn, wanting to make space for that, but also wanting to respect your time to make sure you have
Mhm.
that time as well for the
Mhm.
rest of the demo.
I'm I'm okay. I'm, uh, and I'm okay with whatever needs to happen right
Mhm.
now
Yeah.
for the sake of time.
Yeah, you're okay on time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Good, because I'd really love to make a little bit more space for this. We've gone through a
Mhm.
few of the steps, but I'd love to flesh it out a little bit more
Mhm.
and make space for the grief if that feels helpful for this
Mhm.
polarization too.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So for right now, thank you for everyone for attending and being a part of this process. I'll send out the recording for you to be able to see the rest of this if you have to miss it as well. Okay. And then there is a feedback form in your PowerPoint slides. So if you're wanting the CEUs, if you just fill out that feedback form and if you submit it, um, you will automatically be sent your certificate for your CEUs. There's also a step-by-step guide for those who feel like this is a lot of parts. What are the questions? What are the steps? I have a step-by-step guide that's also in the presentation that can allow you to really follow this process and try it out either for yourself or with your clients. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. There's the feedback form there if that's easier for people. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And as people are heading out, I'd like to just take some time to reconnect with you, Jennifer. Yeah, thank you so much for allowing us again into what's going on with your system, with the fears. It feels vulnerable, and then there's grief that's coming up. Seems like that's been a theme that you've had to connect with and work through. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not surprising at all, but it still felt, different, like something different, just that experience just now. So
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Would it be okay if we continue to connect with that? So this part of you that's been carrying the fear about traveling is that traveling and having to stay home alone at night is actually showing you grief.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else would it like for you to know about this grief that it's been carrying?
Mm. Um, not sure. I just picture this sort of um face on it, like sort of like a scary face, kind of angry face that just feels like it's just holding on. I think there's a little bit of emptiness to the fear holding on to it, kind of like it just feels like it's the grief is what needs the attention and not the fear, maybe.
Yeah. Can you tell me if this grief part is the same part as the fear as you connect with your system? Or is this a part that the fear has been protecting? Does it feel like the same part, or is it a part the fear has been protecting?
Well, it's let's see, it's either this. Oh, wait, let me consider that could be a separate part. It just feels like this fear, this ugly face thing is
Mhm.
wrapped around it. So maybe it's separate, I guess, as I say
Yeah.
that.
And it can be helpful to see, like, can you see if you could directly ask that fear part that showed up at this outdoors meeting place? And it's showing you this grief and this scary face. Can you ask it, is this the same part, or is this the part you've been protecting that actually needs to heal a wound?
It feels like protection.
Mhm. Mm.
Mhm. It feels like a separate part.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so the system is actually showing you the fear is saying, like, actually, I've been a protection, and
Yeah.
there's a part here that's been carrying grief. It's showing a scary face. It's feeling empty.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm hearing like this is a wounded part then that's been protected.
Yeah.
And I just really want to make sure this work is safe and we're not going straight to the wounded part. Can you first connect with the fear part that's protecting it to see, does it have any concerns about us going here? Are there any other parts that feel concerned about us going here?
I don't think so. I mean, this part, like the other parts, feel more like actual people, and this fear thing is like this green creature that's sort of on top of it and doesn't um just not as substantial or something. So it doesn't feel, wait, I think, I don't know, it's like I have the thoughts and the feelings, but it feels like it's easy to
Mhm.
separate that and to step back.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, so the fear part's like a green creature that's on this grief part. that it's been
Mhm.
protecting. Do I hear that right?
Yeah.
And because this is a wounded part that's been there, there's going to be a lot more other different steps to actually work through that we
Mhm.
don't have full time for today,
Mhm.
the time that it deserves. But can you just ask this part if there was one thing for you to know and that you will get back to it at another time? But if there's one thing for you to know right now from this grief part, and what would it like for you to know?
It just takes time, and it needs more time.
Mhm. See that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Even though it's been 40 something years. Yeah, it
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See if you could just extend that validation to it. Like that makes sense that you would need more time. Sounds like it's been a lot and it's heavy, even though it's been 40 years. It needs time. Yeah.
Mm.
And is there a commitment you feel like you can make to this grief part, this grief wounded part that makes sense to you, whether you'll make some time for it, you'll get back to it, you'll
Oh
make
yeah,
space to help it?
definitely.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. How's it responding to that
Yeah,
commitment?
yeah, it's good. It feels good. Yeah. And maybe I guess I feel like I'm taking away the message that it's yeah, just more time and patience. So I need to have patience
Mhm. Yeah.
because we've already done a lot of work together, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, more time.
Yeah. And does it
Yeah,
make sense that these big wounds need patience
yeah,
and time with it? Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. How's it responding to your validation that you hear it and that it makes sense? See if
Well,
you
it
could send
feels
that its way.
yeah, it feels there's a lighter sensation kind of for it,
Mhm.
or just not as yeah, not as heavy. It's lighter.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. If you could also take some time to send some appreciation for this
Mhm.
grief part, thank it for
Yeah,
showing up and sharing this information with us.
yeah.
We can also bring some attention, if it's okay with it for right now, to the fear part that showed up. This
Mhm.
fear part, that green creature has been there to actually protect this wound.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Wow.
And, mm,
I just noticed there's again that there's not specifically anxiety, which is amazing.
mm.
So
You're noticing what about the anxiety?
I'm noticing that neither of these really is the anxiety. Again,
Mhm.
it's grief and the fear.
Right, right.
And this is, yeah,
Mm,
that just is very different for
it's
me.
different. Yeah. These were the parts that needed your attention. That grief, the fear that's been protecting it.
Yeah.
Um, and the meeting place was first for that fear part and the part that just wants to stay home. And just for
Mhm.
right now, as we bring this to a close, is there a way for this green creature that's been the fear part that's protecting actually this wound to actually come together and work with the part that wants to stay home? Do either of them have any ideas on how they can work together here?
Mm. I nothing is coming up as far as how to do so, but I
Mhm.
feel a willingness all
Mm,
around um,
yeah. There's a
from all the
willingness.
different parts. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's just an odd.
Mhm.
combination to have this green creature and this kind of
It
ball
is.
and this sad child
Right.
and then this part that is happier and wants to be alone.
Mhm. Or that's happier. Yeah. Can you see
Yeah.
if they have anything in common? If they were actually possibly both trying to protect someone in there?
Hmm. Yeah. It that rings true as I hear you say those words.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
How
yeah.
are they responding to knowing that they've actually had this common purpose of protection?
Um, it's just it's just a little kind of realization because that wasn't there wasn't certainly wasn't awareness of that.
Mhm.
And yeah, not feeling much more, not
Mhm.
sensing much more of what to make of it.
Right. So I'm hearing at this time they're having a realization. They have this in common. They've been
Mm-hmm.
protecting in the system, and you're feeling like a willingness from both parts to work together and just
Mm-hmm.
see if they'd be continuing to be willing to meet in this way, as then possibly different ideas and thoughts may be generated. Because it's okay that they don't have a resolution for right now. We're just trying to connect and understand them a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like that, like this green creature that's coming up, like I want to change that, the look of it, in order to meet together,
Mhm.
whatever that is.
You're wanting to change the look of it?
Yeah, who's wanting to change it? Is it, I
Mhm.
don't know, yeah, it doesn't feel, I mean, it doesn't feel like such a bad thing. It just feels like it would be more helpful
Mhm.
and be able to get together more if that kind of the look of it were
Yeah.
changed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually feeling a curiosity about if this is its true form.
Mm, mm. It's the material of it doesn't
Yeah.
feel solid, it feels like
Uh-huh.
malleable,
Yeah. Yeah.
but at the moment it's still this same kind of creature, like sort of
Mhm.
gel kind of material or something.
Mhm. Yeah. Because there's a part right now that's wanting to change its look. And I'm wondering if that part that just wants to change the appearance of the sphere part
Mhm.
could also just watch the process and relax back a little bit.
Mm, yeah,
So then you could just show up with the sphere part just the way that it looks, the way that it is. Once that part
feels
that wants to change its
harder
look. Uh-huh.
to let that, or it feels harder for that one to step back.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, Maybe if it can come back, then I can step back.
Mhm. Yeah. You're saying maybe if it can come back, the part
Right,
that's wanting to change its appearance. Yeah.
right, right.
Um, yeah. And it doesn't have to go. Maybe there's like very good reasons right now as to why it's staying and it's wanting to change the fear part. And
Mhm,
when there's more time, I would really explore and connect with that part that doesn't want to step back
mhm,
and really
mhm.
look at what is it afraid of when it sees this fear part
Yeah,
and what's coming up for it, right? That's making it like, oh, I want to change that. I want to change its appearance. I can't accept it the way that it is. And
right.
usually, once we connect with those parts and understand them a little bit better and they're
Mhm,
willing, they're at a space where they're willing to take a step back, because we may do some hope merchant things. Like if they're willing to do that, we could actually help these parts heal through, actually change to its natural state. Would it be willing to do that? Then
Well, that
usually
would,
these
yeah, that would
creatures,
change things. Yeah.
yeah, the creatures usually then, once you're there with the part that's wanting to change it, once you're there
Mhm.
and giving it more compassion and understanding and acceptance, it actually shows its true form to you.
Mhm.
And I had this. I had my achiever part was this weird one eyeball, like like a R2 kind of character, but it had one eyeball and it had like mop
Mhm.
hair. And it was like so weird and odd to connect with. I think our subconscious is so interesting what shows up. And then once I did a little bit more work around that, its true
Mhm.
visual was actually a little 12-year-old girl who's actually
Mhm.
just been really working very hard, was afraid to be seen, but it's been
Mhm.
working really hard in my system to achieve. And she's been really tired and she just needed
Mhm.
um, spaces for compassion and to be accepted,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And then once you get to that space, that may be easier for these meeting spaces, because you're saying it's harder to meet with the
Right.
sphere part while it's looking like the screen creature. It's harder to connect
Well,
with it.
when you were just saying that, I did have the kind of visualization of the fear part being actually sort of the same as the anxiety, but how I felt toward the anxiety in more recent times is it just feels really small. And then this is like
Mhm.
really stretched out. And so anyhow, it's just some sense of it being the same, like a different
Mm.
manifestation or something. Interesting.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah,
perhaps I
you may
can
start to
just
even, you're feeling
explore
some of
that.
the shifts of that
Mhm.
visual of actually maybe this part is also a small young part, just like the anxiety, right? And just where we're leaving off right now, just sending what's helpful is just like sending a lot of appreciation to the parts that did show up.
Mhm.
They, at
Yeah.
least you said, they've opened up to more willingness.
Mm.
None of the parts have ideas yet on how they can work together, but there's willingness to do that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
then there can be more
definitely.
work in just understanding and seeing the fear part without the part that's trying to change it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Did you have any other thoughts or questions for right now, Jennifer, before we close? I'd love to connect a little bit more later too, to like outside of this webinar,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
just bring this
Thank
to a
you.
close for you, if that works for
Yeah.
you.
I don't, yeah, definitely would want to meet maybe. I don't think I have any questions or more to say right now. I just feel a lot more, I feel better. I guess I had a lot of, nervousness and excitement and fear about doing this today. And I just feel more in my body right now and more connected. And this was a really good experience. And
Mhm.
I'll have to kind of process it more too on my own, just to maybe make some notes and carry it forward to work with
Mhm.
these parts more. Yeah. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, thank you so much for, despite the anxiety, still showing up and so generously sharing your system with us. And what I was doing at the end was just really bringing it to a close when you're working with polarized parts, where if the part that wants to stay home can actually see and hear from the sphere part, oh, I've been here to
Mhm.
protect this grief, and
Mhm.
we actually have something in common, it
Mhm.
then starts to feel less polarized. And then you can ask the parts,
Mhm.
how do you feel now towards the other part as you hear more from it and what it's been
Yeah.
trying to do?
Mhm.
And then is there a way you feel like you can actually work together? Do either of you have any ideas? And when there's more time with clients, I feel like I feel badly. We just had such a time crunch towards
Yeah.
the end of this. But when there's more time, they can actually hear each other out a little bit better, hear out the roles, come
Mhm.
up with ideas, and come up with a path forward that feels right for the whole system as you, the core self,
Mhm.
is taking the lead, right?
Yeah.
But right now, like systems are interesting and they're complex, and there's really no rush because I'm hearing like this fear part needs some space and time. The grief part
Mhm.
also needs some patience. There's a part that's afraid of like
Mm.
how the fear is looking. It's harder to
Mhm.
connect with it as a green creature. That part probably needs a bit more time too.
Yeah.
And right now,
Yeah.
what we're mainly showing is just connecting the self to part work, fleshing it out,
Mhm.
seeing the next steps of what could be done for the polarizations there. So,
Yeah.
um,
Thank you. I do notice, I'll say that all the parts seem to stay together, so that's positive. Nobody was running off. They seem to stay close together, kind of in a
mhm.
circle, so together.
Oh, yeah, they're at the meeting place.
So,
They're here together. It
yeah.
takes time. It's like a sweet reunion. It takes time then to
Yeah.
reconnect, to get to know each other, to receive compassion, curiosity, care from your core self. And then it starts to
Yeah.
ease things. There's more willingness, there's more openness to just get to know
Yeah.
and listen and to understand, right? Instead of be at conflict or
Yeah.
at battle or to shame each other and things like that.
Mhm.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you again, Jennifer. Thank you everyone who had continued to stay. I noticed 20 minutes past time. I'd love to connect with you a little bit more, Jennifer. And then if there's anyone with
Mhm.
questions, please feel free to send that as well through the feedback form. If you have any other thoughts right now too, for Jennifer for this work, please feel free to send that in and to you feel free to open your mic if you feel drawn to that. But thank you, everyone. Appreciate you staying and being present for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mary. Thank you, Bree. Yeah, people appreciating your bravery, Jennifer. I know some pieces of that was quite vulnerable when we connect with this young grief. It's such a big wound if it's been carrying it for a long time, right? That's the part that's been needing attention, continuous healing. Yeah. Thank you for your courage and openness, definitely. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for your warmth and for your presence with that, for staying here with us as well. Okay, and I'm just going to close this recording. Thanks, everyone.